What is going on, boys and girls? Hope you are having a great week. It should be Tuesday when this episode airs. Well, let me see, what day exactly is it going to air? So it is for you that are listening. If you listen when this episode premieres, Tuesday, August, look at me, August, June 21st. I'm all over the place today. I don't know, man. I had a great time. It's Friday for me. It's actually Friday the 16th. I was out fishing in Grapevine Lake, um, and it's been 100 degrees here in Texas for the last week, like every day, and it really wore me out today. Like I am beat up by the sun. Like it's not that I'm sunburned or anything like that. It's just like it just takes the life out of you when you are just going miles and miles and miles and just battling the heat. It just takes a toll on you physically. So I am exhausted today. But nevertheless, I am here with the dude Gregory. He's my guest for this week. I do apologize. I'm hoping the audio comes great on this episode. I don't know how it's going to come out, but I'm hoping it's come out great. We're having technical difficulties with the mic, so I'm just using the mic from the computer. Hopefully, the sound quality is good enough. And if it's not, then I do apologize about that. But try to get it done today. But anyways, like I mentioned, I got Drew Gregory. Drew Gregory he's been on a hot streak, like historical hot streak. I mean, won the last two Bassmaster Kayak series, and then the KBF Trail 1, Trail 2, and then the Pro Series were kind of works together. So depending how you looked at it, he either won 3 tournaments in a row or won 5 tournaments in a row, depending how you want to look at it. But regardless, it is an amazing feat. And I am so proud to have Drew on the podcast. And we're going to be talking about something very interesting because in these 3 tournaments, the both Bassmaster Kayak Series and the KBF, it's 3 different lakes, and he won with 3 different species, each one on a different lake. One was a largemouth bass, one was spotted bass, and one was smallmouth bass. And that to me speaks about the greatness that is Drew Gregory. He didn't win 3 tournaments on the same lake or the same body of water or even the same state. He won it with 3 different species on each lake. And I don't know if anybody has done that before, but that to me is an amazing accomplishment. It's Drew Gregory's world. We're just living in it, honestly. So without further ado, we're gonna bring Drew Gregory. Before we go to Drew, though, we got the Waypoints commercial, and as always, thank you to my sponsor, Douglas Outdoors. Go to douglasoutdoors.com. Check out the full lineup of LRS, X Matrix, and award-winning fly fishing rods. So go check them out. Oops, there we go. I'm all over the place. How you doing, Drew?
Man, I'm doing good. That was quite the intro, and I appreciate it, man. You're making me kind of blush over here and get a little bit embarrassed, but I guess that's what
No,
comes with the territory after going on a streak like that.
Drew, it is no, honestly, Drew, not because you're here, not because you're my guest. I am amazed at what you do. Like, and at the same time, I am so jealous. Like, I struggle just to get one bass. And here you are, 3 different tournaments, 3 different species, and you won all 3. 5 if you include the Trail 1 and Trail 2. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about that. But
Yeah,
regardless, I mean, a lot of tournaments, somebody like the Hobie BOS, somebody has the big bass on day 1, and then day 2, it's kind of like, and sometimes not. Somebody doesn't even get the biggest bag on day 1 or day 2. It just averages out. But in your case,
right.
like in the KBF Trail, for those that kind of want to put an asterisk to it, I wouldn't. But you got the big bag on Trail 1, which was Saturday, and on Trail 2, which was Sunday, and
Right.
then you also which fishing the Pro Series, which naturally you won. That is amazing, man. How does it feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's just still a little bit. Uh, I mean, there's really not words because you just don't ever dream about. You kind of dream about winning one or winning an AOI or something, but you never imagine you're going to go 3 in a row and just not lose. This is a sport that you're competing against usually the odds are very stacked against you because you're one out of, whether it's 60, 70, or 80, 90, 100 people, 200 people on maxed out Hobies or national championships, out of 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 people at one point, right? The odds aren't in your favor ever. So you don't dream of it. So I honestly, it's like, I don't know how to even feel. And I've had not too much time to really even do a lot of these reflections because I've been hanging out with the family and mostly since I do podcasts. I've been doing podcasts in the evening and recaps, but when I'm gone from the family that long, they just want, my kids and wife, just time and getting stuff done around the house. So other than coming on here with you guys, I still am a little bit in shock and don't know how to feel about it. I obviously don't want it to stop, but it's going to. That I know this sport's humbling, and I could end up, just at Winnipesaukee in the Hobie tournament. My next one, I could be last place. I mean, you just bottom of the field or whatever. You just never know what's going to happen on tournament day. So I'm not going to get too too overconfident just because I went on a little hot streak here.
So what's your next tournament, you said?
Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire for the Hobie BOS. I've kind of focused on, Bassmaster at the beginning of the year here, and I missed the first one at Lake Fork because our daughter was a couple months old and didn't want to leave my wife when she was too young with a toddler and three dogs. So stayed home, and I knew I had to fish all 4 of those given their Angler of the Year format, and I wanted to give it a shot. And if I fell out, then I would maybe change my schedule and veer a little bit more towards Hobie or KBF or something in place of those. But obviously I did pretty good at Harris Chain, 7th place. Then I won the next 2. So now I need my last one at Pickwick to be good to hopefully have a chance to take that AOI. So, and then I did 1 Hobie in Santee Cooper, and I want to remind everyone I bombed on day 2. I was like 22nd, out of the full field day 1, and fell to 50 something because I only had 3 fish on day 2. So it happens to me too. It's not all glory, guys. I took a gamble and it did not pay off on day 2. I should have went back to what I did on day 1, but I was going for, top 10. I wasn't going for just good points. But anyway, now I'm going to focus on Hobies for the next 4 in a row, basically. Well, I got a couple KBF still, but I'm focusing on the rest of the Hobies here, the last 4, maybe just 3 if I do good on these 3. But then I did this first KBF here. So that's how I ended up on Lake Champlain for KBF. I'd been there last year for the Hobie Bass Open Series where I got 2nd. That was my first time there. And I love the lake. It was awesome. I mean, the whole fishery is incredible. And I said, I got to go back there. Told my wife, KBF's going there. It's a couple weeks before Hobie went there last year. So there's going to be a lot of similarities to what the fish are doing. And I wasn't going to miss it. So I went there and just somehow pulled this off. But yeah, Winnipesaukee. I'm excited, man. Doesn't have a lot of Drew Gregory special, backwaters and creeks and rivers flowing into it. So it's not really going to work there, but that's okay. I'll fish the lake. And obviously it worked for me on Grand Lake, won the Grand Lake Bassmaster on the lake. So I can do it. It's definitely not what I enjoy doing the most, but happy to still, fish the lake and try to find some fish there.
It's interesting because before the start of the season, we were all, some of the guys and girls from the PNF paddle and fin crowd. Susie Roloff was there, Brian, I can't remember, it was Dan or Jimmy, and Jay. We were picking out, how we were going to rank the anglers for the fantasy league, right? And you kind of mentioned, we were going to put you in the highest price, but you mentioned yourself, well, I have a baby, and I may not fish as much. So we kind of lower your stock a little bit. And now it seems like whoever got you got the steal of the years. They're playing the Kayak fantasy game because, man, oh man, you've been on a tear lately.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, thanks, man. Now, I will compliment the because I like to be positive on every trail. They all have their flaws and quirks. So we all know that. And, it gets I think those topics get over discussed more than the positive. And I'll say the positive thing, man, about KBF was, I mean, we added it up and I believe I'm going to take home around a little over $10,000, maybe $10,300. And because I swept the whole thing, obviously, but I was in the bonus bucks. That was $1,000. I was in obviously both the Trail Series 1 and 2 and the Pro Series. So, when you come, it's about $425 or $450, something like that to enter all of it. When you do that and you sweep it, even if there's only, I think there was 88 people total in this event, you come away with, I mean, that's as much as you win at the Hobie BOS for against 200 people, $10,500. So, man, the payouts are great. I mean, obviously you're paying buy-ins a little bit more because the Hobie BOS is like what 260,
265,
but
I think. Yeah.
265, and obviously if it was another $200 on there, it'd be a similar payout for 88 people. But you get the point. It's pretty darn good to get that much money out of that return. So kudos to them. And then Bassmaster, I'll compliment them. If you guys don't know this, at Bassmaster Kayak Series events, they hand you your check when you walk off the stage. You literally go in your car and mobile deposit it right then. It's amazing. So everybody's really kind of getting their stride, all these tournament trails, and they're working on the little things that we've kind of nitpicked about online. They see it, they hear it, but it's getting better. It really is, and we're still in the infancy when it comes to this stuff. So just want to give them a shout out for what a great job they've been doing. And obviously Hobie, we all know what a great job they've been doing for their Bass Open Series as well. So I'm excited to get back to the Hobie Bass Open Series in Winnipesaukee, because I may be looking pretty darn good at AOI for KBF now with those couple finishes for the Trail Series at least, and obviously for Bassmaster. But I'm nowhere in Hobie right now, so I got a lot of catching up to do. So we'll see if I can. I just want to make the TOC. Forget AOI. I just want TOC like everybody. That's your goal. Get into all the championships, and if you can get into the hunt for the AOI title, cool. But in every one of these trails, I just want to be, kind of at the championships where the biggest money is handed out. So that's my goals at the beginning of the year. But you're right, I didn't have a ton of events on the schedule. I mean, with the family, I've got, 13, 14. I know a lot of people fish, mid 20s or whatever, but that's kind of what I'm always going to do. Just 12, 13, 14 max. Just, that's a lot when you got a family and you're taking off a week at a time. So plus ICAST and other things we got to go to during the year that take up another trip, so little boy is starting to really, grow into into his own, little Theo, and he's 4 years old, and he just mimics everything I do. And he is so cool, so fun. And I just want to be around him as much as possible to continue to be such a good influence on him. So how can I continue to balance this? And I don't know if I'll be able to even this year, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit 3 KBF events. Now, if I've got 2 Trail Series number 1, so if I hit one more weekend, that's 2 more chances to get a good finish to be in the AOI running. But for the Pro Series AOI, I would need 2 more weekend. You know what I'm saying? Like 2 more events to get 3. I may not even make it for those because St. Clair and Erie, I might have to fly right back from ICAST and go without any practice. And then I'd have to go to Winnipesaukee. It'd be the only other chance that I could make it for a third. So I don't know, but that's okay. Family's more important anyway. So if I don't make it there, I'll try to put the efforts in the Hobie and Bassmaster and maybe just the Trail Series if I can get to one more weekend for KBF.
Yeah, and in your case, like it's a lot different than like 90% of the people that fish those events, because in your case, this is actually your livelihood, right? This is your 9 to 5 kind of thing. This is not your pastime. This is not, your weekend warrior kind of thing where you're out of work. No, this is your work. This is the way you put food on the table, fishing all this tournament.
Yeah, for sure. Yes and no. You're absolutely right. I work in this industry, but I don't rely on.
Not the checks,
anymore.
but
not anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I work in the industry, so I design the kayaks for Crescent on our specialized fishing line. But you are more correct than you even realize, because we've not had this new Shoaly kayak that I was fishing out of, which is kind of cool that the boat I designed is still undefeated in tournaments.
Yeah, that's crazy.
For the Lewis Smith Bassmaster, I got in it and fished out of that for the first time, the production model. And then before it was even released, we released it like 4 days later, 3-4 days later. So it was kind of cool. People got to see the catchboard recess and the Tourney X pictures, and there was a lot of buzz going on about that and all the features they could see just within that photo, since the full boat really hasn't been released, the walkthrough. But for the last couple of years, with the way life has kind of worked out with transitioning, moving up to Ohio with the family and moving with Crescent. And then this is the way it was when I was with Jackson early on too. You don't really get any money from the companies until you have a product that they can start making money off of, because they're just investing in so much resources and income in the development of the whole thing, the mold, all the R&D, everything. So they don't. So I kind of worked a deal out where I literally have been surviving off of tournament winnings, and kayak fishing tournaments have given me a chance to get by and bridge the gap for my family. It's been incredible. So another big shout out to all the tournament trails. I mean, again, we nitpick them, but I wouldn't have been able to get by with my family without this. And I get paid from sponsors as well. Not all my sponsors, but I'd say most of them. Something, right, to help, a little something between the sponsors and the income from the tournaments, the winnings. I mean, guys just provided. I can't even explain how incredible it's been to be able to kind of like bridge that gap until now the boat's here. And then hopefully we can start making some money on all the hard work we've put into that cool Shoaly kayak. So been pretty cool.
Yeah, it is a sweet kayak. And there's a couple of talking points there that I wanted to mention. First of all, yeah, I think you're right. We do nitpick. Now, we wear different hats. For example, you're a tournament angler. You're more so than a content creator, I would think. And you're also a designer. As myself, being a podcaster, I view myself as more of a journalistic approach. And that comes with nitpicking, And,
Yeah.
We've talked about things that Bassmaster can get better, and KBF, and even Hobie BOS, because, as great as it is, there's still work to be done in the industry. But let's focus on the positive, because I think my listeners are tired of me nitpicking. What have you liked about the Bassmaster Kayak series so far?
Yeah. No, I like the fact that it's the Bassmaster name, and it's not just the name it is, in which I grew up with, the magazine and all that, not the prestige of that, but that's cool for sure. But it's also, look at their following on social media, and look at their well, we don't see it, but I kind of know what it is, their website traffic. Okay. They're constantly putting out articles and covering the events with their media coverage. When you get done with the tournament, like I said, you get your check right there. You get your phone rings from the writers from bassmaster.com, and they're like, "Hey man, great job. Congrats. Let's get this story out there and get you, the press that you deserve." And that's great for sponsors. So the Bassmaster Kayak series is, man, I tell you, it's probably the best in terms of getting the most bang for your buck. If you're in this full time or aspiring to be full time and get sponsorships, and it's not a knock on Hobie BOS and KBF, because they are awesome, but they haven't been around as long as Bassmaster, Bass name. We all know that. That's not, it's nothing, no fault of theirs. And their tournament trail obviously is kind of newer. So, and this is more of a knock on a lot of the marketing directors out there. A lot of them do not know what KBF is or means if you win one of those, or what, that it was the founding kind of tournament organization for kayak fishing. They also don't know what Hobie BOS means, and that really it's like the top talent in the sport is all there. And winning the AOI when I won, back in 2020, I mean, they are like, congratulations, great, that's cool. Or if you go to a new sponsor, they're like, well, what is that series, or what's, is that where the best anglers fish? I mean, you have to explain that to them. So with Bassmaster, if you can imagine, like nobody has never heard of that. Everybody knows that. Every marketing director out there that's making decisions knows that. So Bassmaster has that kind of going for them. And it means, which is crazy to me, because, you can win a tournament against, potentially a smaller field or whatever, that, some of the turnouts, some of the scheduling, Easter weekend on Grand Lake probably wasn't the best scheduling, and around a couple other big events, which next year I know they're going to have a much better schedule, a much better game plan, because they're learning from their mistakes as well. But you see what I'm saying? It basically, like, when you get that, like, look at Ike and Ellie. He won against 40 something people. He was all over all these podcasts about my Bassmaster kayak trophy, and nobody, said, well, how many people did you beat, or were any of the top anglers in the kayak fishing in that tournament? No. And they really shouldn't have. I mean, he maxed out that fishery and caught fish as good as he could, and he can't control how many people enter. But you get my point. I mean, Bassmaster just has that kind of going for them, and they do a great job. They've got some areas to improve on as well. They really do. I think when they get, maybe they'll add another event or two, and they'll get some the scheduling a little bit more dialed in, where you don't have some big gap, and maybe make all 2-day tournaments, stuff like that. That'll kind of step it up a little bit, and if they can do a few little things like that and adjust a couple little things, I think it's going to be one of the best trails out there. So that's the thoughts on Bassmaster. I mean, hey, by the way, or sorry,
Right.
oh, I
No,
was
no,
going
go
to say,
ahead. Go ahead, please.
speaking about like the coolest part was, like I said, getting that coverage. I'm on Bassmaster Radio's podcast. I'm on Ronnie Moore called me up. Hey, let's get you on my podcast. You're starting to get into a lot of these bigger. It starts to get us, the sport of kayak fishing, into those bigger podcasts. You know what the ones I'm talking about that don't really have any kayak anglers on. In my opinion, I feel a little bit like they don't respect us because they don't call us. They don't really seem to care, even though their podcast is supposed to be all about bass fishing and tournament fishing, not bass boat. It just like the name BASS does not stand for Bass Boat Angler Sportsman Society. It's, the Bass Angler Sportsman Society. It's about the fish. So my point is that when I go on these bigger podcasts and stuff, I'm going to try to continue to encourage them like, hey, you guys need to potentially have some more of these kayak guys on, because we know a lot about catching these fish, and we're hitting the length to weight ratio. We're hitting the same weights, if not bigger, than the boat tournaments. And you're going to get a little bit different perspective and different juice than a lot of the boat guys as well. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts there.
No, definitely. And I do want to clarify something. I do think Mike Iaconelli got some shade thrown on him. Not him at his win, because he didn't win, because he had kind of addressed it on KBN. Now, mind you, a lot of that comes from the KBN group page, which I'm a part of. I'm not dissing on anybody or anything like that, but that's, truth be told, that's usually where you get a lot of the criticism, whether warranted or not, if you want to call it trash talking, if you want to call it constructive criticism, there's a little bit of both in there.
Yeah.
I do think, and I do defend Mike Iaconelli, because he mentioned this on the KBN interview. A win is a win. I mean, and going back to your wins, if anybody's out there going to question, here's the thing about it, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. If you're the Cleveland Browns, nobody hates you because you're not doing anything relevant.
Right.
If you're the New England Patriots, everybody outside of New England hates you because you're winning everything.
Right.
Kind of thing. So in your case, you are winning, and there's always going to be haters or critics and naysayers, whatever you want to call it. My thoughts on anybody that wants to put an asterisk because, it's Bassmaster, the attendance. First of all, that's not your problem. That's not your fault. You don't need to apologize. You paid your entry fees. You got there. You did your job. You showed up. Second of all, when you look at the numbers, right, on that lake, you didn't win with a subpar number. Like on the Bassmaster Kayak Series, both of those tournaments, your bag limit was on par with what that lake holds. Like you were getting the full potential out of each and every one of those three lakes that you fished. I don't care if it was 500 people on that lake. I personally don't think, looking at the numbers, anybody was going to beat you that day.
Right. I wish there was 500 people in the tournament. See,
more money.
Because even if I was second or third or whatever, I probably would have got more money. But like you said, that's exactly the point I've been kind of hitting when everyone says that. And it's not about, like, this isn't even about me, guys. This is just about anybody who wins tournaments in the future, whether it's 45 people or 400 people. This is the same conversation I'd be having, and I've always said about Iaconelli and other people who've won some smaller events. I mean, you can't control who's showing up, and it's not your problem. I look at my schedule based on the tournaments I want to fish, the lakes I want to go to, and the ones that line up where I can get enough, like I said, to hit at least the minimum to be able to qualify for the AOY runs, which usually those championships go by those points. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And I know, a little bit taken out of context, I have mentioned on my podcast before that Hobie went to Eufaula. I don't like Eufaula. And Hobie went there, and I was going to fish the off of KBF event on Potomac. KBF at some point changed their schedule, so it moved that tournament on Potomac, unfortunately, where it wasn't on the same weekend. So I didn't get to go fish it. But part of my plan and what I said was I'm going to there's going to be a lot of the sticks in this country. The national sticks are going to be over there on Hobie, Eufaula, and I'll be over there on Potomac. For my goal to try to get good AOY points. Now, I may not have 200 people to compete against, but I was just like, hey, it's an event that's closer to my house. It's new for me, which all things I want to do, close to my house, fish new water. And obviously, if you do have a lot of the big hammers somewhere else, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt if you're trying to just get a high finish for some points. So, but anyway, I don't look at the standings. I'll honestly sign up for them as soon as I can. I'm usually one of the first to sign up this year, and then it is what it is. And I hope, like you said, 500 people show up. But exactly what you said is correct. I actually pre-fish with that mindset of I look at the weights that are winning or the past weights during that time of the year, bass boat tournaments or kayak tournaments if they've been there. So I know a number I got to hit, which helps me in pre-fishing because I know if I'm around the right fish or not. So in all these situations, you're right. I knew I maxed out the lake, and I was proud of what I was able to do. No matter if somebody beat me, then I would have been like the first to shake their hand and be like, dude, you don't have no idea how much you just crushed it. Because I know I crushed it. Like on Grand Lake, for example, starting there, had like 91.5 inches. I think second place. I don't know if you got it pulled up, but it was like 6 or 7 or 8 inches. I had difference on the next person. And what I had weight equivalent was about 20 pounds. And a 300 boat tournament had fished there the 2 days before, a championship, Nichols, I believe. So 300 boats is 600, 2 days, that's 600 bags. And only 2 of them had 20 pounds or more out of 600 bags. One of them was 21 one day and 23. So I know I maxed out the lake, and I wish there was more people in the tournament, but there wasn't. But again, Easter weekend, I think, hit hard there. And some people had issues with the Grand Lakes rule about not being able to go more than 100, whatever it is, 150 yards offshore, which is crazy because it was mid-April and they were like all on the bank anyway. So why would you care if you couldn't go further off? But anyway, so I feel good, man, because I know it's me versus the lake. It's not even about me and how many people are in the tournaments. I can't control that. So it's me versus the lake every time. On Lewis Smith, I knew it was going to be a little bit smaller bag. So 89.5 won. I believe it had 89.5. And that was kind of hitting, anywhere between 14, 15, 16, 17 pounds was winning their tournaments. So I'm pretty sure I had on the upper end of that, 15, 16 pounds probably. So because those fish were post spawn, they were skinnier. And so that's why 91.5, you say, well, dude, you're saying 20 pounds was 91.5. That's a largemouth and pre-spawn. And these are long and skinny, other than one large, that was a largemouth in that tournament. They're the more of the Alabama bass, which they weren't weighing, as much, but I bet you I still had 17 pounds or something. So I knew I had met pretty much, 16, 17 pounds and maxed out the lake. So I did all I can do. And then obviously in Champlain, same thing, a different species again, like you said. And then I maxed it out. I know I had 21 pounds the first day and around 21.5, 22 the second day. And the tournament, the Bass Nation, New York Bass Nation had a tournament the same day, and 19.5 won it. So I know I feel good because it's just me versus the lake. And then if I do my job, nothing else really matters. I mean, where I finish is just like where I happen to finish. I mean, so.
And that's a great mentality, I think, and a great point. It's a lot of times we view it as you against 200 people, whatever. And it's really not. It's really you against the lake. It's you against the potential of that lake. You look at the numbers, you see what the potential is. And you say, okay, I need, whether it's a 1-day tournament or a 2-day tournament, depending what it is, I need X amount to maximize the lake. And that's the number that I'm going with. And that's a great point. And a lot of people don't get that. And I think that's a difference between how you fish in a lot of ways, because now you're not looking at the leaderboard. You're just saying, this is the magic number. I need to either surpass it or come as close to it, regardless of what happens at the end. And you approach, that's going to be your approach. And that's a great point. Now, when you look at, and I wanted really to touch on this because I think this is what the most amazing part of it and what really speaks to your greatness. And I mentioned this on the intro. You won one lake with a largemouth bass, the string of largemouth bass, or a bag of largemouth bass, whatever you want to call it. Another one with a bag of mostly, or if not all, spotted bass, and another one with smallmouth bass. How were you able to do it? Like, what's What's the difference in approach with each lake? And what was your game plan? Not on each lake, but what was the difference in game plan from one lake to another? Assuming that you did target largemouth bass in this lake, you target largemouth spotted bass in this lake, and you targeted smallmouth bass in this lake. Like it wasn't like, oh, that's what I caught. It really was what you targeted. How
Mm-hmm.
did you what's the difference between the game plans from one lake to the other?
Well, you really don't know until you get there, but the game plan was certainly largemouth in Oklahoma because that was there are some smallmouth in that lake and in those rivers and creeks there are, but I'm not going to get into the weeds, but it's a different strain of smallmouth, and it does not get. It's called the Neosho. It does not get as big as these Tennessee River, like the main Mississippi River, smallmouth lake, the Great Lakes, all the basically the rest of the country. So it's actually a different strain, and people don't know that, and they go in those rivers and creeks. They start pre-fishing, and they probably think, "Dude, I'm gonna catch some eventually. If I keep catching smallmouth here, I'm gonna catch a giant." But you're not. You're gonna catch one that maybe maxes out at 17 inches. That'd be a good fish, but I'm talking that's your biggest one. You can pray to God you even get one that's even that big. So compare that to the size that largemouth get in Grand Lake, you're going to lose if that's what you're targeting. So the game plan was I need largemouth. They have spotted bass there as well as northern strains that don't get big. So the game plan is where the largemouth spawning, and I had to find the right spawning pocket where they were, and I found them and stayed there all day long. Had a plan B and plan C for sure to go back on. Fortunately for me, I never had to go into that plan B or C. Then move on to the Alabama, like you're saying, and the Alabama spotted bass, or technically Alabama bass is what they are now, but we still call them spotted bass. So for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to call them Alabama spotted bass. But anyway, they are, that one was a little bit different because sometimes those largemouth, it was like post spawn there. Sometimes those largemouth and big Alabama spots will intermingle in the same areas. And where I was, I happened to catch that 119 and a quarter inch largemouth that was on the stringer, but all the rest of them were the Alabama bass. And the game plan was just, and that one was just I found a couple creeks feeding into it that after the spawn, okay, you're gonna have fish do two things. Go, okay, because think about it, like we're not cold blooded creatures like they are or whatever. So, but if you can imagine, we just hit summertime, right? Like, how good does it feel to go out on a windy day or a windy evening, right? When you got some wind hitting you compared to when there's no wind, when that sun's hitting you, right? Feels good, doesn't it? Okay. And it's a little cooler and it just feels nice. It's like air conditioning. There's two ways a fish can get that. Again, we're different blooded creatures. So, but they're even more so this way. Like, they're even more so. And I feel like they're going to go into current, moving water and current to get what feels like an air conditioner on them. It feels good and it's got a lot more oxygen and it's flowing, and it's exactly like if you turn a fan on or go out in a windy day, and it just feels so much better than being in that still stagnant heat, right? If you're there and there's no wind, oh my Lord, is it not good, right? But the other way they can accomplish that is to go deeper. If you've ever jumped in off a cliff in a lake, you realize how it feels cooler when you go down that first like 10 foot or whatever it is. There's a transition, and there's still good oxygen down there as well. So you get my point. I had to do one of those two things. And with me being a river creek guy, it was pretty obvious what I was going to do. Go to a creek and look for the fish that have moved up there to find some of that cool water. Now it's a challenge because you got to catch the alphas out of every spot there is one, because it's skinny water. And if somebody else is there, you don't catch that alpha, you're done for. And I just happened to, and at 130, which we haven't really talked about that tournament, but at 130, I had like 75 inches. I had nothing. I'd missed a couple fish, caught a bunch of small ones, but nothing good. And I replaced my entire stringer from 130 to 210 in that tournament, and lines out was 230. So it was a magical, like little 40 minutes. So that was the game plan, is to go where the moving water was with their air conditioning on their bodies and they feel better. And the few that went that direction after the spawn, instead of out deep where the majority, probably go. And it worked. It just happened to work out. I caught him and executed. And then the different game plan on up on Champlain for the smallies was simply it was kind of similar, but I think they utilized certain zones of the rivers to spawn, and they kind of congregate there. For my shoal bass history, again talking about the shoalie in Georgia, they all moved to a lot of the biggest shoal complexes in the river to spawn all together. And I make this analogy. It's like, where college kids all know on a Thursday, Friday night, where they're all going to go the street with all the clubs and the bars. They all know, hey, it's Thursday night. Here we go. They know it's up there. It's June, early mid June. It's time. The water's getting the right temperature, so they move to certain zones. So I knew I was going to target smallmouth and rivers because I felt like smallmouth were going to be the species that was going to win Champlain, even though you can catch big largemouth there. And they get pretty long too. You could win it with largemouth, but I just felt like smallies were going to be a little bit longer if you had to give like a little bit of an edge. So I knew smallies and rivers, looking for the areas they were going to spawn, about to spawn, maybe spawning. And last year I caught some that were spawning actually, but this year I think they were. I actually don't know if they were pre or post. Quite frankly, it was a little bit of a mixed bag maybe, but I never saw any on bed. But I think they were in that zone for that region, so that was the game plan on all of them. And then it's just crazy that it worked and it all came together, and that I was fortunate enough to execute. And I miss fish like everybody, missed plenty of fish, but I had enough bites to where obviously I was able to just get the job done on a couple of those tournaments. Grand Lake was definitely won by a good margin, but barely won on Lewis Smith by about a half an inch, and then quarter of an inch both days on KBF. But then again, it was like 4 inches over the 2 days together.
That is amazing. I'm still in awe of the knowledge that you're dropping right now, because it's, and again, it's two things. You can tell the now, for those that maybe didn't understand what you said when you mean, or didn't understand when you said you fish the lake, you don't fish the competition. You fish.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. You're not looking to beat 100 and whatever your competitor is putting out there. You targeted a species that you think is going to be the predominant species that's going to win the bag, and then you execute a plan. And that, first of all, that doesn't happen overnight. Like not a lot of people other than you and maybe a few others can just go out there and say, okay, I'm going to go for smallmouth bass because of this, and have an actual, not an educated guess, but an actual data knowledge, firsthand knowledge of what the bass are doing, which is the predominant, kind of like the alpha or the apex predator in that lake, and where can I find him at what stage in their cycle, where it's post-spawn, spawning, or pre-spawn.
Right.
It's I don't know how you can teach that. Like that just comes with knowledge and practice.
Time, man.
How have you able to acquire that knowledge, honestly?
That's a really good question. And I always joke around with people and say, it's honestly because my wife never showed up into my life until I was 35 years old. And I was fishing, I got real serious about fishing again. I had a bass boat in college. I've always fished all my life, rivers and creeks growing up with my parents. And then my dad and I converted a 14-foot John boat into a little mini bass boat with a deck on it. And we'd fish smaller lakes. And I worked at Bass Pro Shops, the second one that ever opened in Atlanta in 97, 98. I was like a senior in high school. And then I learned a lot there from those guys. That stepped up my game a lot. When you work behind the reel counter and you talk fishing every day, for a whole year before I went off to college, kind of took a year off, you learn a lot. So then got pretty serious about it again and started kayak fishing about 2004. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I had a long time until I met my wife and was just really hardcore fishing all these rivers, was addicted to shoal bass in Georgia for a long time. And it just took time on the water, and experience, just learning. It's like if you make a cast out in the middle on a current seam or something in the water, a boil that the first time you get bit there, you're like, okay, and then you've learned something, and now you keep adding that, and that's just, it's, again, it's not like every time you see something in the middle of the river you're going to get a fish, but there's current seams and things that you don't see that I now see, and I consider it, I call it sort of reading the matrix of the river. I just sort of like understand it now, where they're going to be, and when and where. So it took a long time, and I'm actually going to do some more. I've done this some lessons, some guided lessons. Sure, I'll still do some of that maybe in the future, but more I'm talking like virtual lessons in the winter when there's not a lot going on and we got the cold, long Ohio winter. I'm going to definitely do some of those so I can help teach some people, and maybe we'll have like some classes where five people at a time we get on together and I teach some of the strategies and stuff that I'm talking about. I've learned over the years, and it didn't really feel good for a while. I mean, it didn't, just personally, I was like, man, it's weird, like doing that and taking someone's money for stuff that like it's just, to me, I've just never learned it to make any profit off on it when you're just a kid learning it, just fishing, when you're younger. But a buddy of mine guides in the Florida Keys, Randy Morrow, Lower Keys kayak fishing. And I went down there many trips together when I was because he was on the Jackson team for a while, and I got him on our team, and we developed some boats that were really good for fishing down in the Keys. And when that guy, he lived there his whole life, pretty much, I think his whole life he's been fishing. When that guy taught me all the little small things about permit and redfish, or well, some redfish down there, but more permit, bonefish, tarpon, snook, a few that get kind of that far down. When he taught us how to catch those fish, because you got the Gulf and the Atlantic coming together through these islands. You got a high tide and low tide in different oceans, but yet they're not tiding actually a solid bank. They're now flowing through these islands together. It's weird. Like, how can this will be high and this be low? Because this, and he's like, well, let me explain how all that works and what the fish do. And we learned it took us so many trips, but not that many trips compared to think about how long it took him. I'm talking 20 plus years of fishing down there, having to go out and learn the hard way, take his licks, learn the hard way, spend all the money, all the time on the baits, all the money to gain that knowledge that he has now. And we learned it in, probably a couple of weeks worth of trips from him. And I could go down there and explain where to go when and why we're moving now and getting out and going to a different spot based on the sun positioning and the tide and everything. All because he taught us that he took, and that's kind of, took 20, 30 years to learn. That's kind of where now I'm like, oh my Lord, I can save people so much time and so much money. And it's not going to be that much for each of them compared to what they would spend. It's like a penny, you know what I mean? Compared to what they would spend taking the time that all the time, hours and money spent to learn what I learned about the bass, right? Especially river and creek bass, lake bass too, but specialize obviously in the moving water and backwaters and stuff. So I'm going to do some lessons like that, but that's pretty much it, man. I was just young, single, and I became friends with a lot of other talented anglers and biologists. So I love to look at things from a biologist perspective, fisheries biologist. Dr. Steve Sammons is a good friend of mine, Dr. Andrew Taylor. I got just a few other biologists that the guys at Clemson, those biologists work with over there, Brandon Peoples. And every time you get on a trip with a biologist and you talk to them, oh man, and Hooked on Wild Waters episodes, we had a lot of them on as guest hosts. I mean, like side stories. It's amazing the stuff that you just start soaking it up, So that's kind of to explain it. That's kind of, what it comes down to. And I'm obsessed with it because this is a sport like golf where you can never figure it out fully and learn it. You'll always be, your brain will always be like intrigued and have something to kind of figure out. You can never just, I got it. Now I'm bored. You're never going to get that way ever. So between all those things, I guess that's the best answer, and how I've somehow kind of know all the stuff I know now.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's no fast track. I mean, you can lessen the learning curve, of course,
Right.
With technology now and trying to have conversations with the right people. But there's definitely no fast track when time on the water is time on the water. You're not gonna gain Drew Gregory's knowledge, or Cody Milton for that matter, or Guillermo or Christian Fisher in one day out of the water. It takes years. It takes a lot of times and a lot of dedication. The more time you spend research, the more time on the water helps out, but also in your free time, the more time you spend, you know, watching, and not just watching YouTube, or watching the right ones, the ones that are really going to teach you, and not a bunch of other stuff that's out there that's really kind of redundant.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, if whenever you're gonna do those, whenever you start teaching that, just please let me know.
Yeah.
I'll open up my checkbook. I'll be first one on the list if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I,
buddy, man. No problem, man. Happy to do it. The cool thing about all this is, and I know we talked about this before we started recording, we want to touch on it, is the other little component to all this is, when I'm out doing the river bass and hooked on wild waters, I never looked at those fishing trips are just fun fishing. I just never looked at them as, how am I maximizing this fishery? It's just kind of like, this is the float I'm doing, and let's catch fish on it and have fun. Whatever happens, it happens. This is a whole nother puzzle and a whole nother game. And I feel like that's where I'm sort of coming into my own in terms of understanding how a little bit different this is, because you still need to know where they are and all that stuff. But now it's about, time. And trust me, I never did any sort of map study and prep work for when I'm out, running the river bass and tournament trail, traveling the country, all these different places, which is a big part of I feel like why I'm successful in all the different species all over the country. Because before I got into tournaments, more full time in the last 2.5 years, between Hooked on Wild Water show and that running that river bass and trail, I was traveling all over, fishing all different places, catching all these different species, and I feel comfortable anywhere for any species. I kind of know what they do and how they act. But now it's a whole nother game, whole nother puzzle, which is cool. It's kind of like now I'm map studying, like just grinding over this whole body of water. It's not like just one float we're going to do this day because we're filming in this river or whatever. No, now I got all of it at my disposal, and I got to try to maximize a number that lake can put out, like we talked about. And that's a whole different game. And I'm just sort of now kind of perfecting that strategy. And a lot of people know me for sure as fishing small waters and backwaters, but you can't get locked in because you got to go where the winning fish are, where it's going to happen. You can't lock, which is why I ended up on the lake for a lot of my greatest, finishes, whether it was in Grand Lake or second to Mike Elsey in 2019 in the KBF NC out of like 500 people, like on the lake. So you got to go, first of all, you got to know when to go where and why, and when to just know, okay, it's not going to work in the backwater, skinny water stuff. And then that's a whole skill set right there. But now it's also about, well, people know me as a guy. I think I'm starting to get known as a guy who moves during the tournament, or at least isn't afraid to move with my Tacoma. I crank up the outboard Tacoma, like I joke around and say, throw the kayak back in there and move. A lot of people, and again, if I can find a spot where the winning fish are just right there, or there's a spot where I can catch big ones and then paddle or motor or pedal, whatever you do in your tournament, to another spot right there without taking out and launching again, obviously that's the greatest. That's the best, because then you don't lose any time casting, or you lose minimal time. But I'm not afraid to take the kayak out, drive an hour and 15 minutes like I did on Champlain, and lose all that time because I know where I'm going, and I'm confident where I'm going is quality. And when I get there, it's not going to take long to catch them. It's no different than a Bassmaster guy making a long run, a 30, 45 minute or hour further run, just to go hit like one spot or one area, because he feels like, but he only does that because he's confident that he has caught them in there in pre-fishing, or he knows why they're there. And I'm just not afraid to kind of like do that now. I'm coming into my own in terms of my experience on these, but now I'm getting a little bit of history in some of these fisheries, although I'd never fished, Lewis Smith or Grand, but Champlain I had. So, getting a little bit of history, and that's kind of helping. And honestly, man, it's not like, it's obviously a shock that this happened, but last year, on the Hobie BOS, I had a second, third, and a fourth, and I had a third and a fifth, and some other top 5 finishes on KBF. I was fifth in AOI in KBF heading into the NC, and I was second in Hobie. And there was no AOI in Bassmaster. I'd fished one, got like 7th, cashed a check in it. But so it's really not like that. It's not like all of a sudden I just came on the scene. I think it gets forgotten a little bit because my motor blew up on the second day of the KBF NC, and I didn't get a chance to go where I was going, and I was in like 4th place or something into that, and it dropped me down for the trail series. That was the final day, and ended up third, 28th or 29th out of 130, which is still a good finish, but it kind of like I knew I could have gotten the top 5 or top 10. And then our little girl came and I didn't get a chance to defend the AOI over there as I was second heading into the Hobie TOC. So it's not like, I feel like sometimes we need to appreciate and respect the, a lot of the, which you guys are good about having guys that aren't the winners always on second, third, fourth, fifth. I mean, and that consistency, that's not easy. And then if you keep doing that long enough, you're going to get your first. It just obviously happened to be 3 in a row for me, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling now. But yeah, it's just a different puzzle now that I'm working on figuring out, and I've got it kind of dialed in, and hopefully it can just somehow keep going.
You've definitely got it figured out, and if you haven't, I don't know who has. When you look at some of the big names out there, some of them kind of jump off the page. Cody Milton, Guillermo Gonzalez, Christine Fisher have a great season. Who do you think is on par with you? Like now, and let's be, I don't have to be humble for you. Like in my mind, I think, Guillermo Gonzalez has a great season. Last year, one of the best seasons anybody has ever had.
Oh yeah.
You've had great seasons for the last few years. Cody Milton, I can say the same thing. Christine Fisher always as well. In my mind, I see you, maybe Cody Milton along with you. Who do you think is the best angler outside of you out there?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting a lot of the names that I really feel are kind of at the top of the sport right now. And I know this is always a hard conversation because we're going to leave somebody out, and then that's fine. I've been left out of, I love the sport so much. I'm a fan. I listen to, pretty much all the podcasts, listen to a lot of your podcasts, listen to, all of them that are out there on these drives. I have to go to all these events. So when my name is not said and it's and I get it, I'm not full-time in this the way that other guys are, and they have more chances. So we see their names a little bit more. But which is, to me, is probably what I'm even more proud of, the fact that I'm doing what I'm able to do with less events, less attempts. But anyway, that's I get motivated though when I don't hear my name as one of the top. I'm like, man, all right, what am I have to do? I'm gonna just wait, and it motivates me. And it's internal. It's not. There's never any like animosity towards any angler at all. I love Cody and Guillermo and Christine and Russ and Jody and all the ones who, there's some good sticks. Eric Siddiqui has been on a tear this year. Justin Largent on the Bassmaster side. People don't realize how good this guy is. He's on the top, and he's fishing Hobies too. You'll see him up top. He's been fishing KBFs. You'll see him up top. He's in the lead in the Bassmaster AOI. I mean, there's a lot of good sticks, which, by the way, real quick before I finish up with that, when people discredit or want to put an asterisk on how many people are at a tournament, that's actually a pretty big insult to the anglers that were in that tournament. Not as much, the guy who won sometimes. That's actually a little bit of a cut down. And you can look at the names that are in even these tournaments, even though there's not, because think about it. If you're putting up 200, the most possible for kayak fishing tournaments, you're putting up 260 or whatever it is, or for KBF the whole weekend, almost $500. You're either confident you're going to do good because you are either local and that fishery, or you're a national guy. And if you're traveling, it's not even the what you're putting up for the purse. I mean, the entry fee. It's, think about the Airbnb, the hotels, the gas. If someone is confident enough to spend over $1,000 or $1,200 or $1,500 to go fish that tournament, they're not playing around, dude. They have some idea and skill set and talent because otherwise they'd just be fishing local and regional stuff. They are good anglers. So I don't like when people, almost want to discredit anybody that wins with a lower field, because they're still beating a lot of talented and competent anglers who clearly have, ideas that they know a little bit about that fishery, or else they wouldn't be putting up all that money to do it. But anyway, so the big names, let's get back to that. I really feel like Russ is still like one of the best out there, man.
Yeah.
I think maybe he fishes a lot of times a little bit like I do. Cody does too, to some degree. Guillermo, I run into him and Christine, I actually run into them quite a bit pre-fishing, because they're versatile. They kind of do a little bit of everything. They'll win, and look at Guillermo. He won several events in a row. He won a Hobie in the lake. I think it was actually, might have been Pickwick in the fall, and then he went straight to win the national championship right after that, right? and he was in the lake again, from what I know. But then he went. I think he might have won the first trail event in Florida after that too. He might have
Yeah,
done like 3
with
in a
no
row as
with
well.
no pre-fishing, and
No
not in his
pre-fishing.
kayak. He was not in his Diablo kayak. He was
Right.
in a Lynx, I think it was. So
Yeah,
it wasn't even
maybe.
his kayak. I don't think he
Right.
was even his equipment, and he still
Yeah,
won.
he's just got the
Yeah,
instinct. He's just got the instincts too, because he's
he's
been
got
doing
the
this.
it factor. Yeah,
He does. So those guys are all have it between Cody and honestly, man, if you put a lot of these top guys up there with some of these the bass boat guys, I wouldn't be shocked that we kind of hold our own against them. I mean, because we're also, again, I'm looking at the weights in comparison to what the Elite Series guys are catching on those lakes at these times of the year, and I'm hitting the same stuff they are. So doing it a little bit different way. But and that's the beauty of the sport too. Again, I'm not trying to get off on anything, but it's worth mentioning that I'm not some sort of spokesperson for. I mean, if you want to fish rivers and creeks and you get inspired by what I do, I think that's awesome. It's great. You're probably going to look into the getting the Shoaly kayak from Crescent, since it's really designed to be very good for that. And I'm excited about that. Obviously, I want to see a lot of people in that boat having fun, making memories, catching fish. But I don't want people to get the wrong idea that it's there's a lot of hard work, and you don't just stumble in some wild remote place and just start throwing 20s on the board. It's you got to know which, because most lakes have a lot of feeders and a lot of backwaters, a lot of feeder trips, right? So it's not that easy. But what I think is the coolest part of our sport, Armando, that I think will make us stand out and make us so unique and so just cool to follow, and it already is now, but when this is on TV, is the fact that you can win a tournament. I mean, if you go back and look at the data, I'm pretty sure it's 33, 33, and 33. And what I mean is percent. And it's most tournaments are either won, 33% of them are won on the lake, offshore. 33, and what I mean by offshore is just you're not casting to the bank. 33% of them are won on the bank, on the lake banks. And then about 33% of them are probably won in the main river or the some of the tribs, right? It's pretty darn equal. And you're like, oh, really? Yeah. I mean, like offshore, yeah, you go to Lake Erie and St. Clair and places like that. Uh, there's a lot of ledge tournaments, things like that. There's a lot of tournaments won that way. And then, I mean, it's just pretty even, wouldn't you say? I mean, I think KBF has said that the data actually bears that out. It's pretty dead even. So that's what's going to make it unique. So if you like my style and you like keeping it simple, just a paddle, I didn't have any electronics paddle and just a kayak and a few rods. I had 4 or 5 out there with me. And then just a few tackle boxes, keeping it simple and lightweight. I encourage you to give it a shot. It's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of stress that comes into it, because if you don't catch the alphas that are in those areas, if it is small, skinny water, or if somebody else shows up, or if it floods on the Friday night before the tournament or things like that, then you are really, you're not going to have any shot at winning. Everything's got to line up perfect, so it's not easy.
no, definitely, it's not as simple as some people try to make it out. Like, oh well,
Yeah.
he's fishing, backwaters. It's backwaters is the ones that get either the first ones that are get affected by any weather changes in weather, and the ones that are going to affected the most. So anything that happens,
Yeah.
like rain, rain's going to flood, the rivers and the backwaters first. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
they're pulling water out of the lake, they're the ones that are going to be, you can feel the bass really feel like the water
Right.
dropping and then causing it to move more than the main lake. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can, just say, well, it's not pressured bass or it's backwater, so fishing is simpler. Not really. I don't think it is personally. I think
Right.
it takes a lot of studying and it takes a lot of preparation to figure out which
Right.
which creek is the one that's gonna might produce, and
Mm-hmm.
how is it gonna be affected by the ever changing weather, and and the water levels, whether it's going up
Yeah.
or going down. So it
Absolutely.
yeah, in one sense it could be easier, but in the other sense it's only easier if you do the
Mm-hmm.
research and you have the knowledge to anticipate how the weather is going to affect it. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, Drew Gregory does this, so I'll just pull a Drew Gregory and win.
Yeah.
Not that easy, dude. It's not that I
It's
show
not.
up on Drew Gregory's spot where he showed up last year and I'm going to catch, 100
Yeah,
inches. It's not
it's
that.
not. It's
So
not
it's
easy at all.
just
You're right. It's not. And the thing I was going to say too is a lot of the when you get into skinny water, like creeks. I mean, the bigger the ocean, the bigger the fish. That's true. I mean, you're just not going to catch. Usually, there's a lot of small fish that's like a nursery. The smaller and smaller. At some point, a creek is too small for a bass, right? But now let's get to a size creek that holds bass. The smallest it could possibly be. There's not going to be 3 and 4 pounders in there. There's going to be dinks. It's a nursery. And then you get to a little bit bigger, and then of course they continue to get the size potential gets bigger with the bigger tributary. So it's you can go in there, but if you're going to try that skinny water, then you're competing against fish that are inferior in length to the ones on the lake that the other guys are having to fish from, and they potentially are finding schools of 30, 50, 10 that you'll never have, and that's what's challenging about it. But I tell you what, man, it is a lot of fun, and a few names because I want to get more names out there because I want to try to promote other anglers. But I got to put, Bailey Egbert is on fire right now. He's won. He went from a national win in Hobie on Eufaula to cashing another check on Chick to winning a local, 2 locals now in between there, and then casting a check in another one. I mean, he's on fire. And then Eric Sadiki's been on fire. That guy knows how to find him in a lake the way that I know how to find him in rivers and creeks. He just knows where to go. I mean, he got the wind and the weather messed him up at Champlain, but his first cast, the first spot was a 20 incher he posted on Instagram on Champlain. He was on the right fish that could have won. He just couldn't get to his spot and stay on it because of the wind. And then another couple names I'll throw out there, the tandem duo of Ewing and Nolan Minor.
Yes.
I know that they haven't been around. Like Ewing last year showed what he could do. And again, he fell because in the TOC, I think I wasn't there, but I think he maybe got 4 fish one day, didn't get 5. But it's like, you can't discredit a guy's whole year because of one. I mean, I won AOY because Russ and Jody didn't get 5 both days of that TOC. But, man, that guy can fish. I mean, Ewing is a stick, and we're seeing that now. He's cashing a lot of checks, making another run this year. And then his brother is, older and even, more experienced. You could argue coming off the Bassmaster Opens, he missed the Elite Series by a point. So, great guy and really knows how to catch them. I'll throw those names in there as some of the top of the sport that maybe people haven't really been thinking about as much.
Jordan Marshall, who won AOY in the Hobie BOS.
Yep.
I sometimes feel bad because we forgot to mention his name. But yeah, Jordan Marshall is another great angler. Yeah,
he's having a great year. He is. He really is, man. And I'm glad you brought him up because he does a lot of the river stuff too. So that's kind of cool. And I know he fished the River Bass and Tournament Trail that I started and was kind of inspired by some of the stuff that I had going on early. So now it's great to mention Jordan for sure because he crushes it. And he's actually coming into, his own, man. Like he won the AOI and then now he's kind of like, he's getting more and more consistent. He's had some events that weren't so good earlier in the year. And that's actually the hardest part. I'll be honest with you about doing that style. Your January, February, March tournaments, March, if it's somewhere that's still really cold, it's hard to win in moving water. Very hard that time of year. And those the only tournaments that he's done, not, to the level I know he would expect himself to be at this year. So look out, man, because that guy's on a little tear for sure. And the weather's just getting right. So I expect to see him continue to do good.
Yeah, no, Jordan Marshall is another great angler from Tennessee. So, props to all of them, man. Anybody that's out there, just putting in the work is deserves, to have their their name mentioned and recognized, whether you're winning, cashing checks or just struggling, just being out there and putting yourself out there. I think it deserves respect, and I don't think anybody should take that away from anybody else. Drew, I've had you for over an hour, and I do appreciate it. I know you're a family man, so I don't want to keep you too long. I kind of wanted to give you a few minutes to shout out any one of your sponsors. I know you have a lot of them. And plug in your social media as well, as far as and your podcast.
Sure, buddy. One of these days I'm going to get to do another podcast of my own with Ken. It's kind of been, push the curb a little bit because I've been doing so many podcasts after these wins that I'm just like, man, I'm beat. The story's been told. Not that I talk about the wins in the tournament so much on our podcast, which is the River Bassin podcast, if you guys want to follow along. But we talk a lot about river strategies and things like that. And I mean, hopefully we'll get one here soon. But anyway, yeah, you guys check that out. And then the other thing I will mention is, on every podcast, I'll try to mention maybe some different sponsors because I'm not going to mention them all. If you follow me on Drew Gregory Fishing, that's your smartest move. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. But I'll say, big shout out to Yak Attack, who I'm going to kind of really highlight right now because their new blackback came out. It's great. I used it. And the new Shoaly kayak that I designed has a ton of Yak Attack components built into it. And man, without those guys and their support, they're actually the ones who John Hipsher was the one that suggested, was the first one that really pushed me and said, you need to focus on these tournaments, man. That you're doing really good in the few national championships you fished in. And that's the one thing I would fish in, just that one tournament every year. And then he's like, dude, you got all top tens. I mean, that's not like, there's something to this. You need to focus on it more full time. And I'm glad that he mentioned that because I was kind of thinking about it. And then he mentioned it and it pushed me over the edge to do that. And so big shout out to Yak Attack, make great products. And then I've kind of mentioned the bending branches already, Real Tree Fishing, AFCO's new this year. So you can see the hat and all that good stuff. They make incredible products. And then the last thing I'll say, we've talked about it, but the Z-Man baits, I mean, I threw pretty much all Z-Man for all these tournaments. We didn't talk about exactly how I caught them, but pretty much I'd say like 80% of the fish I caught that actually were scored, maybe 75% were on Z-Man baits. The rest was on a top water plug that Z-Man doesn't make. But yeah, so thanks to Z-Man, big longtime supporter, and obviously everyone at Crescent Kayaks for all that they do for us. And I love their hashtag, and our slogan is "Live in the Current." Hashtag Live in the Current. So it always reminds me, to live in the fishing current, of course, but also to live in the present, this moment, because trust me, man, as I talk now, I know that one day this is going to be a long, memory way in the past. And I'm just going to live right now in this moment because this is pretty cool and pretty special to have these 3 wins. So I'm super thankful and blessed to be here. And I don't take it for granted. And thank you guys so much for your time and for what you do for our sport.
Got to mute it there for a second. Thank you for taking the time to come up to the podcast, and congratulations. I mean, again, amazing win. Nothing should be taken out of it. You found bass, 3 different species on 3 different lakes, and you came out on top on each one of those lakes. I don't know that anybody else out there could do that. I know for a fact nobody else has ever done it in back-to-back-to-back tournaments. So it speaks to itself and your greatness, and we look forward to what you're doing. As long as I'm not in the same tournament that you are, I wish you the best. If not, I'll just follow along and get those bass that you miss. That's going to be my new strategy. Nah, just kidding.
Yeah, man. Hope to see you
congratulations.
soon.
Definitely,
thanks,
man.
Bud.
We gotta meet up.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Well, thank you guys for having me, and y'all have a good one, and hope you enjoy the episode and learn something.
No problem, man. And for those out there listening, if you made it this far, again, we thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Go follow Drew on Drew Gregory Fishing on Instagram and all his social media platforms, like you mentioned. If you're going to be on the water, please wear your PFDs. If you're going to have a couple of beers or drink alcohol while you're on the water, just, try to be responsible and, make sure you make it home back to your loved ones. Have a great day, everyone, and peace out and tight lines.